It's a great honor, Mr. President, to have you here with us today. And as many on this session will know about you and your background, I'll do a quick introduction and then move on to some of the many questions that we'll try and cover in the next 30 minutes. You were elected President of Armenia in 2018. You are a distinguished scientist with a deep understanding of technology. You've won the Lenin Prize and studied alongside Stephen Hawking at Cambridge, and you were the first ambassador to the UK for Armenia, as well as then following Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, the Vatican, and head of mission to the EU. And you've been advisor to the EBRD and to the Kennedy School of Government, and to many multinational corporations such as BP and Bank of America Merrill Lynch. So with this remarkable career, you're probably one of the best placed to opine on the world today and how we get the next 10 years right. So if I may, Mr. President, turn to you and ask, as the world is responding to COVID-19 pandemic in different ways, can you talk to us a bit about how Armenia has responded to the pandemic and how you see the world changing as a result of the crisis?
Well, Alexandra, it's a great pleasure to be here at this wonderful event. Well, Stan, thank you for the introduction. And Armenia, I would say we are in the middle of the process fighting coronavirus, and the government is trying to do their best in order to achieve success in this fight. But unlike many countries, now we are just climbing the curve. Is that curve Gaussian or any other type of a curve? We have not reached the maximum of that curve, and that makes us quite vulnerable. For a small country like Armenia, Armenia has 3.5 million population. Today we are seeing between 500 to 800 infected per day through testing, and unfortunately around between 7 to 15 deaths every day, which is tragic and too much. I'm not going to discuss what did we do right or what the government did it right or wrong, because there will be plenty of time in the future to discuss who did it right, who did wrong, because unfortunately I don't believe that this is going to be the last pandemic for human race on this planet, because viruses, bacteria were with us for thousands of years, and we were coexisting and fighting with them. For many viruses, we don't have cures even today, and we have to learn how to live with them. But the main way of fighting coronavirus, as 100 years ago, is to keep the social distance and not to allow the virus to be affecting our lives through going too fast distribution. But there's no way that in the 21st century we can avoid this, because this is 21st century and the world has dramatically changed. It has dramatically changed because we live in a very fast world. We live in a world that is, our lives is half virtual, half real. We are concentrated in big cities. We are concentrating in big shopping malls. We are traveling in big airplanes and sharing the air there. We have managed to hurt our nature. I mean, I'm speaking about the world. And we have managed, and that is why whatever is happening today is dramatic. But also, I would not say that the world has changed because of the coronavirus. My statement will be that the world was changing the last several years, several decades. We were not noticing that this is a completely different world than it was before. And the coronavirus is just an accelerator. You called it accelerator, cold shower that has forced us to understand that the world that we live is different, and we have to act to fight pandemics or any other risk differently than we were doing before. And Armenia is not unique in this case. We're a bit later than some of the countries. We are doing a bit better than other countries. We are doing a bit worse than the others. But the solutions more or less are the same. So the question is, I hope that we will reach the maximum of the curve sooner rather than later. And as the President of the Parliamentary Republic, my role is to advise the government. My role is to lead whenever they need leadership. And to be honest, yesterday I had a very long discussion with our Minister of Health and also former ministers of health, doctors, actual prominent doctors and heads of hospitals in order to discuss what's next. So today we're having hard times. So what's the strategy? What are the necessary moves and what sort of managerial skills or the tools we need tomorrow to accelerate the recovery of Armenia from this pandemic. Of course, Armenia is a small country that gets also support and help from other countries, but don't forget that Armenia is a small state, but quite a big global nation. There are 3, 4, maybe 5 times more Armenians living abroad than here in Armenia. So we share experiences with them worldwide. So we are in the middle of what is happening in the world, but we have our difficulties today that we have to overcome. But the point that I want to make is that coronavirus is not the reason of the change. It's just probably a consequence, a result of the changed world. Because in this new world, a lot of risks are spreading much more faster. They are unpredictable. The ways that we have to fight them are not the classical ways that we had 50, 40, even 30 years ago. So we have to rethink this new world, and we have to rethink how we fight pandemics in this new world.
And actually, you touched on some of the things that I'm really keen to get to throughout our discussion here today. But you've already touched on this right now, but you've coined a new term, quantum politics, which is really interesting. And you've mentioned some of the elements that go into that. And I see that you describe this, which is reflecting the way in which interactions between individuals and politicians and nations has changed, as you just said. And you were getting to, and you were touching upon this, but I'd be really keen to hear if you could unpack that a bit more. But also, when we're looking into the next 5 to 10 years, how do we need to, with this sort of new world we're in, where it's more of a quantum state than a classical state? How do we, knowing that, how do we organize ourselves in the sort of medium to long term?
Well, thank you for the question. The understanding or the thoughts that the world has changed is with me for many, many years. Between politics, when I was prime minister some 24 years ago, and now presidency, I had also the time of running academic research, but also working with big multinationals. So I had time of thinking, and of course, as a former physicist, for me, I sort of discovered for me that we are living in a world that is united. So things that we apply, or ideas, or mathematics, or principles, or philosophy that we apply to nature, in many cases could be applied to human race as well, or to us. So we are not separate. We don't live with different logic than the nature. And the moment you start thinking about human race and human society globally, you discover that, of course, we are different today than 100 years ago. So what does the word quantum politics or quantum world mean? It means a lot of things. Of course, in a couple of minutes, it will be very difficult to explain that. In short, when I say quantum, I mean many things. First of all, I mean that this world is different than the classical world that we lived, let's say 30, 40, or 150 years ago. What has changed is this is a world that has become unpredictable, unstable. There is too much fear on discomfort because the things could not be predicted as before. And that's why it looks like sort of a random world, that random things are happening. Maybe the reason for that is that the way we approach to the world, or the way we do our research and understanding of the world, the logic that we use is not the right one. We are still using classical ideas of political institutions, political parties, even basic and fundamental ideas like democracy and others. We are still using the notation and understanding that was formulated 100 years ago or after the Second World War indeed. But the world has changed. The world has become much more faster. The world has become much more quicker, interconnected. Quantum also means that the importance of an individual or a quantum object that is the human being now is different than it was, let's say, 50 years ago, because this individual can communicate with the speed of light through Facebooks, through new technology, through many ways with the world. A big part of our time we are virtual, a big part we live, you can say we live in the matrix. The half of our life we live in real world, and this has huge impact on our behavior. It has huge impact. First of all, that matrix or the virtual world is where we act as a quantum object in many ways, is not regulated. We are free, we do whatever we like. There are no moral values in many cases, and there are no restrictions. Of course, this virtual life or the matrix will have direct impact on our natural life. So we live sort of in a quasi-classical, quasi-quantum world where individual power becomes more and more powerful. It shows also in politics, because a part of politics, which was always the case, you go back 2,000, 3,000 years ago, entertainment and politics were bound together. Remember gladiators and so on. So now in this new world, I think the merger of entertainment or direct access to the public and politics is becoming much more obvious. And the way political events are happening, they are happening in many cases, not because there is a structure, there is an ideology, there is a political party, and so on and so on. In many cases, it's happening because there is an individual particle with high energy, with the right message, in the right environment, and that individual or individuals with high energy can create a chain reaction like in physics. Mm-hmm. You have highly energized elementary particle hitting an environment which is the right one, like uranium, specific type, and then you get a chain reaction. So after one hit you have 10, after 10 you have 100, after 100 you have 1,000, and here you are, a chain reaction that you cannot even stop. Look at the several revolutions or changes that happened, or elections that happened in this world the last 10 years or 15 years. Sometimes unpredictable, sometimes people that were nowhere 3, 4, 5 months or a year before becoming a leader, they come, chain reaction, and they win. Mm-hmm. So the world has changed. The power of individual has been growing. There are many other reasons why we call it quantum, and the other reason is that amazingly I found that methods of physics, of natural sciences, or indeed the quantum ideas of quantum mechanics could be used in order to describe what is happening around us. In some sense, this is a quantum world, because if I compare development of science, and specifically physical science, let's say a bit more than 100 years ago, and development of the world, political world or economic world today, there are similarities. If we take science or physics 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, we were again on a crossroad. We were on the crossroad because the beautiful, fantastic, classical mechanics that was explaining everything on this planet started not explaining several phenomena or tests, and scientists were lost in order to describe the big, the cosmos, or the small elementary particles. And then human genius, in the name of Albert Einstein, Max Planck, Heisenberg, and many other names, came out with a completely new approach. Basically, what they have changed is the logic, how you approach, the philosophy of thinking, and what makes common sense in classical and now in quantum. The moment you change your approach, the moment you change your logic or what is common sense, because the common sense, the theory of relativity, and the common sense in classical mechanics, they are different about when you speak about what is simultaneous event. So Albert Einstein was genius saying that let's change our perspective, the way we think, then we'll explain things. The same is happening today. If we continue thinking in describing political life, social life, things that are happening in the nature, using the philosophy and logic of our classical behavior that was 40 years ago, we will not achieve, or what we will achieve is we will be lost. We don't understand what's happening, there is no explanation, things are haphazard, and we're all concerned with the future because it's unpredictable. But the moment we start thinking differently, we start thinking quantumly, many things will become explainable and also predictable. So it's the similarity is there. So it's the time for humanity to embrace quantum politics and to start thinking what will be the new laws, what will be the new approaches, how on earth we are going to run, for example, basic idea of democracy when everybody votes today the same moment. Politician says something, 500,000 people vote. So it's not voting today and another vote is in 5 years' time, and in between the politician has the luxury of running whatever he has to run, and then will be responsible or will come to with his results in 5 years' time. The politician has to answer today, every day. And we see in many countries, from small Armenia up to big states, like in United States or in France or anywhere in Europe. So quantum means many things, but it means first of all that this is a different world. And pandemic is a consequence. It's a result of the change. It's not because the world has changed. That's why we have this virus affecting us so dramatically. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a very full response, and it touched on so many things. And one of the sort of two things I hope we can get to before we reach the end of our time. One is sort of directly related to the quantum politics and how you see this, the changing dynamics and in the way that the world works and we interact. Was that a big part of your thinking when launching Atom, Advance Tomorrow, your long-term strategy for Armenia to play a big role in sort of AI and technology? Was that sort of aided by the thinking that you've done on quantum politics? If you could just unpack Atom for us and what that sort of how you see that being implemented in Armenia, and then I'd love to also get your opinions and views on the role of smaller states.
Well, it's again quite a big theme to discuss. I'll start with Atom. Atom stands for me, Advance Tomorrow. And when you are president of a country, even non-executive president, like I am, because I'm a president of a parliamentary republic, president can lead through ideas, and Atom is a presidential initiative. If you take coronavirus as the boundary, like the fall of the Berlin Wall in politics in between two worlds, if you take the coronavirus as the boundary, not the reason, but the boundary, the new world that we are going to enter definitely is not going to be the same as before. So we have to revalue many things. And many things will become much more important. First of all, healthcare. So we have to spend more time, energy, and effort and money on developing and strengthening healthcare in many of our countries, much better than we were doing before. We have to spend more money on research on health and biology and biotechnologies. That's for sure. What also becomes very, very important, how we structure our industries and which sectors will become more attractive and which sectors will become the ones that people would like to put money there. Because coronavirus, this cold shower has dramatically changed even the stock exchanges, when huge amounts of money, when the industries were stopped, huge amount of cash were injected into this. So it has created a lot of questions. There are more questions how we are going to run, for example, tourism tomorrow. So there are many, many questions, but also in this dramatic world with the deaths of people, with infected people, there is also something positive that gives us the opportunity to think about the future of our planet, but also the future of our own country, our own families as well. So where should we invest money? Definitely the future is with artificial intelligence. And that artificial intelligence, among other discoveries, are the drivers of the future of the planet, like discovery of electricity, like discovery of the power of the vapor, the discovery of computers. We should not be afraid of that. In fact, we have to embrace it because it will dramatically change it. And I don't call it fourth industrial revolution because I believe that we're entering an era which is going to be our evolution, rapid evolution. Revolution it sounds, but in reality it will be permanent evolution because science and technology will come with new ideas. And one of the cores of this change will be artificial intelligence. It will change dramatically how we run everything in our life, starting from farming, going to healthcare. We'll be able to discover things that we're not even dreaming, how to diagnose, even finding solutions with complicated things like the viruses with the help of artificial intelligence. So if I'm dreaming Armenia to become an important country, even being small, global but small, definitely I have to put my money and my effort in developing artificial intelligence in Armenia. So Atom Advanced Tomorrow is a presidential initiative to encourage, to make Armenia as one of the small but leading countries in the world on artificial intelligence. So the components of that, first of all, is of course education. Very important. You cannot develop any new technology if you don't plan for years. So if you'll not be supplied by new younger generation of talented engineers and scientists. Secondly, the whole culture of startup, because this world is becoming a startup place. I mean, look at the biggest companies in the world. They all were startups of an idea, and they became huge multinational companies. The same will happen in the future because this is a quantum process. Because you have to support the individual power, which is individual or a group of young people, or old but young people, with the spirit of the belief that they can come with an idea and a process or a product that will change the world. And this will be the drivers of the future. So Atom, and the third is that you don't have to discover the wheel again as a basis. You go with the best of the best in this world. So my dream is to start big labs with the big multinational companies that already are the leaders, be that in, let's say if it's in Europe, let's say Thales, French, or Dassault Systems, or Leonardo in Italy, or Siemens in Germany, and so on, in companies from Silicon Valley, IBM and others, and companies from the East, from Russia, from India, and so on, you name it. So not to discover, but to create joint ventures, small labs where the excellence will be based, support with this with good quality of education, with the logic and the culture of startup, and also, of course, support them financially, because they have to get some financial support in the form of getting those who are doing specific research in this sector. They should be not paying the same taxes and others, so there should be incentives for them to go ahead, and there should be incentives from foreigners to come and invest money in these companies. In brief, this is the idea. The same is in short, the small states. I think the world has changed. If individual can have enough power of influencing things in this world, why on earth small states cannot do that? There are a lot of examples, and that recently I have spoken to this with colleagues and deeply with Prime Minister of Singapore, a small but successful state, with Emir of Qatar, small successful state, with the leader of United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Zayed, small successful state, with President of Israel, small and successful state in many aspects. So in all of these states, you can see the importance of new technology and new thinking and sort of a spirit of a startup. So I would love to see Armenia as a startup nation, as a nation of global nation, small state, that has the spirit of believing that you can be successful and become one day influential, although being small. And the idea is to create a club of those who believe in the same values. This is not a club about economic relations. It's not a club about having common this or common that, common geopolitical interests. This is not about having military interests, not at all. This is a club where we share values and ideas, and we come together to learn from each other rather than coming together against someone else. No, coming together for this planet, because there are so many challenges.
As you know, we published the new big global index on artificial intelligence, and what we see very precisely is that smaller countries are really able to punch above their weight with the right policies in place. So I echo very much what you say.
Mr. President, Alexandra, thank you for a fantastic discussion. That was absolutely brilliant, and I look forward to hearing the further questions.
Mr. President, it was such a pleasure and an honor to have you speak just now on many things. We've just scratched the surface, it seemed. And a lot of great questions have come in through the chat, and I feel I've hogged the stage in terms of asking my questions. So I'm now obliged to ask some of the questions that are coming from the audience. And I'll start with the first one from Lois. And Lois is saying, as a renowned scientist and businessman before going into politics, would you say the traditional role of the career politician is now dead?
I don't like dramatic announcements that the traditional way is dead, but definitely there are a lot of new ways that we have to discover how to prepare the next generation of specialists and so on. And this was happening for a while. I do remember when years ago my son was graduating Harvard Business School, and he came with his friends to Armenia, and at that time I was based in London. I came to Yerevan and had the pleasure of meeting 20 absolutely talented people. And I asked a simple question: would you guys, what do you want to do now? There, probably 30 years ago, Harvard Business School graduates, everybody would have been dreaming to become investment banker. But they were speaking about real business, startups, or going into technology or food. Because even at that time it was clear that food as a risk, or food companies that will be producing more and more clean or ecologically clean food will be important for the world. So majority of girls and boys were saying that they are not planning to become investment banker. They want to go into real business and real world. Secondly, I think the structure of a business is different. You take a big multinational company, engineering company, classical European one. Basically you were going to entering university, you were coming to the company and starting growing with years and years here, achieving position of vice president, and if you were very talented, becoming CEO or CFO of the company. But now most of these companies are using inside themselves startups, because they believe in the young talent, because in many ways the amount of information and the speed of that information and the speed of digestion of this information is far ahead than it was, let's say, 20 or 30 years ago. So it's not about what do you know, because what do you know, your telephone knows more than you, so you don't need to. What is that you can do with that data? Are you talented enough to absorb that and to digest and come up with a new idea of that? So the way you teach is different. The way we run our lives is different. Of course, e-governance is something that everybody talks, but it's a part of our life. I think this pandemic, as a consequence of the changed world, has shown that we have to really think about how many things we are running in this world, starting from culture and art. I read a dramatic article recently saying that if this continues the way it is going to run, even Covent Garden the Royal Opera will be having huge problems in maybe they will be closed in autumn or something. So how we run culture, how we run theater, how we run opera, how we run food, what sort of food, and do we like it or not, we have to rethink again about the climate change and more deeply about the influence that we have on nature. We're not hurting only the climate, we're hurting a lot the physical nature that doesn't have impact on the climate, but it is contaminating them. So the way we have to prepare should be different, much more. I'm looking for girls and boys that have wonderful education in science, technology, engineering, but also they are good managers. So it's the classical business school that is masters in business administration should be merging with technological or scientific schools. So we need new people that both deeply understand technology, because technology will change so fast. If you don't understand it, you will be left behind. So someone that really understands, has a wonderful education in natural sciences, engineering, technology, and also knows how to manage things. So it's more a time of renaissance. You go back in Middle Ages, the beautiful part of Middle Ages, when because of the high-speed development, because of the mentors that were in Middle Ages that were supporting technology and science, you were finding geniuses like Leonardo, who was both great scientist and also great artist. So it's a time of individuals that will merge human qualities, starting from culture, science, technology, and I hope also something which is very, very important, also human values. Because if you have all of these wonderful people, the new leaders, but they will not have morality, moral values in this highly vulnerable new world, then we will be in big difficulties. So along all of this, we have to also teach them or prepare them to be responsible leaders, responsible to themselves, to their nation, to their family, to the nature. So morality becomes a part of education, along with religion, family values, and so on and so forth. So I'm being someone that praises quantum world. In fact, I'm very, very sort of a classical, absolutely classical when it comes to values. Family values, we are a very classical, traditional Armenian family, modern, but very Armenian family. And it has importance because in this chain of education, it's very important not to lose the track of who you are. Very important. I think where you come from and what is the new value that is based on the heritage of your nation, of your family, of your own, and develop something new based on that.
So there's a lot of, thank you so much for that answer. It was very thoughtful. A lot of questions are coming in on education. And now Armenia has a legacy of scientific excellence, and there's lots to build on from that. But the question is coming in from someone who's asking, for nations that are not really putting the same emphasis on education, what would you recommend? How do you either get your policymakers to turn to that and understand the importance of the human capital and human resources in the country, or are there other ways? Some are suggesting better access to big global educational platforms. So what would be your recommendations there?
Well, global access to best universities in the world or best schools in the world is going to happen and should be happening. It is going to happen in the boundaries even of one state, because if you take small Armenia, definitely the education in the capital city, Yerevan, is better. You can find wonderful schools and good universities in Yerevan, but if you go to the boundaries of the country, the schools, they don't have the same quality. But luckily, we are living in a world that it's connected, and the schoolgirl or the schoolboy in a far village can get more or less the same education if the system allows, or if we put an effort there for example, to organize the best lectures of the best teachers on mathematics, physics, history, and so on, for those who are far from that. So the distance in many ways will matter and will not matter. So everyone should have access to the best in the world. That's for sure. Secondly, we were speaking about, well, with that we don't have enough time, but when we speak about our human values, and the important parameter that is running us is time. Because you start your life somewhere, you end your life somewhere, and you always think about the future. You think about the future of your nation, of your family, of your children. That's who we are. And we're not alone. A lot of species on this planet think the same way. See how protective animals are to their children. So investing in education is a must. Mm-hmm. If you are born in a very, very poor family, that happens. So I've seen many things in many families and lives. I take my own family. I was a very young boy, 10 years old, when I lost my father. Was a very talented architect, but he died because of illness. So we were raised with my sister by my mother. She was working in 2 places, and the only place that she was investing her energy, money of the family was education. Because if you are poor, if you have not achieved what you would like, if you want change your status, there's only one way of doing that, through education. And more so, because this planet is becoming more and more not based on natural wealth. So look at the biggest companies on this planet. They are not natural resource companies. They are more and more idea companies, IT companies, and others. So in the future, more and more it will be based on technology, on an idea. So the best way of fighting poverty, invest in education. Invest in education if you are successful. Otherwise, if you are very rich, very successful family, but your children are not well educated starting from human behavior up to science and technology, you will lose whatever you have. And if you don't have anything, you will get everything if you invest in education of your children. Mm-hmm. Education is a must. And this world gives you a lot of opportunity for that.
Yeah. No, thank you. And a sort of a follow-up question that's come in on that is the question of, as a national, education should be a national priority for every government around the world. But for those that are possibly not prioritizing it the way they should, what are the but also maybe more broadly, there's a question coming in about what is the role of the multilateral organizations such as the UN and on the health side, WHO and so on and so forth, that seem to be fragmenting slightly, but is there a role actually as we rethink and go into the next 10 years, what role do you think they could play in all of these things that are important to get the next 10 years right? Or is it really down to the sort of getting it right at the national level? What is your perspective on that?
My perspective is that we have to get it right on levels, all levels, starting from individual family, going up to the states and international organization. On this planet, we are not so rich in order to say, okay, this is wrong, let's forget about it, let's start from scratch. We know how hard it is to start something from scratch. You're speaking about United Nations. It's a great achievement of humanity after the Second World War, after the huge loss of human lives, after the big tragedy of the war, to understand that we need cooperation, we need dialogue, we need something which is called tolerance to each other. And UN is a great achievement. It's a different story that we have, because we recognize that the world is changing, we have to start using the fundamental values of UN or other international organizations or unions in order to bring n number of countries together on a specific platform. It's already a difficult task. You cannot just say, okay, this was wrong, let's start something new. It's the wrong way. We have to base our success on our achievements and our heritage. Then, of course, because the world is changing, we have to revalue many things that were successful before to make them basically adjustable or successful today and tomorrow. So definitely the relations between states or the way they interact in the framework of United Nations or related organizations should be continuing, but we have to rethink what to do with it. And I'm proud to say just last year I was asked to chair a group of prominent leaders from different countries, presidents, prime ministers, to rethink about the future of UNCTAD, UN Trade Agency and so on. And they were smart, they came to us asking that we want to know how we should be different in the next 10 years or 20. And they asked us, members. And I was happy when I was in Geneva, they asked me, and I said, definitely I'll find time in order to work with the UN organization in order to define the future of this organization for the next 10 or 20 years. So whatever we have is a value. Let's not think about destruction. There's enough destruction in this world. Pick up what is valuable, build on it, make it more successful, and adjust it for 21st century, the quantum century.
Right. And actually, there's just another question that came in that is a great segue to this, which is that if the international organization should but might not be able to play the kind of role that we would hope, you have you mentioned earlier that you were on a visit to Israel where you were thinking about this idea that you voiced this idea that you've been thinking about for a while about an international club for small nations. So maybe is this where maybe a banding together of small countries that are showing best practices and policy success, would that be something? I'm not saying replacing, but the question is, could that maybe play a more robust role going forward as examples of achievement and examples of doing more with what you have? So if you could reflect on that.
Well, with pleasure. First of all, I think this idea of a club of so small and successful states, I had it and had discussions with other leaders much before than my recent visit to Israel. Although I discussed it with the leadership, and specifically with President and other colleagues in Israel as well. But I had the idea much before and to discuss with a lot of leaders. So the answer is, this is an idea of a club. This is not an idea of replacing anything, any organization, and creating something as an alternative. Not at all. First of all, it's an idea. Secondly, we have to come together. And this is a club to share. As I told you, United Nations is a huge organization. European Union is a huge organization. Eurasia Economic Union is a big organization, huge organization. So the club of small is something that we should come together, not become an organization for this, for that, or just a place where the successful states and success, well, I have my definition of what is success, but definitely these should be countries that are sharing the vision for the future of the 21st century, and a place where we come together and we share what we have achieved and share ideas, and if necessary help each other. Nothing more for the moment. I think any thought of that this club will replace this or that international organization or will be pro or against this or that organization is not helpful, and it will harm the idea. Just forget about this. We have to support all existing organizations. If they have failed here and there, we have to think why they have failed and support and strengthen them. But in the meantime, what I'm suggesting is a completely independent place. It's a club where we come and share with no idea or any force to come together to fight for this or that. No. It is all about sharing vision, experiences, and the successes that will help us to go into the future.
Thank you. That's serve as an inspiration, I think, but thank you for clarifying that. It's an interesting idea. We have only just a few minutes left, and there's a question that has come in, taking us back to the role of startups. As this question is phrased, it is if you could go back and unpack that a little bit more in terms of what you're thinking around creating the right ecosystems for startups, as it's so important to maintain and attract talent. And as it seems that the hottest commodity in the future and now is talent and being able to attract that, if you could just go back to part of your talk earlier about the importance of creating the startup ecosystem and how you're going about that.
Yeah, it's very important, I think, but we should not be misleading people that a startup is just a couple of young people, absolutely brilliant, that coming up and with an idea, and then here you are. We all know that it's a very hard life and a very hard path in order to come from a startup to a success. And in many ways, startups are successful in those countries that have advanced technologies. Why on earth the biggest venture funds are in the United States? Why on earth the biggest venture funds in the United States are in California? Because they are not very far from Silicon Valley. And of course, Silicon Valley venture funds are the place where the startup could be successful. So if you are a bit far from Silicon Valley, first of all, far is a relative thing today, so you can be in touch with them. You can have the new technology or the world companies, be that from Europe, from Russia, from China, from America, being attached to you here. But then you have to take care of a startup. A startup is not something that it's not a tree that will grow on its own. You have to take care of, support them with financially. In Armenia now, if you are a startup up to 30 members of the company, basically you are not paying tax. This is a support. So anyone that wants to start a startup in Armenia, there are wonderful conditions, talented young people, and if you are a startup, you get the financial support. There is an organization in Armenia which is called Seaside Startup that brings together hundreds and hundreds of startups together for a festival. On a seaside or near Lake Sevan, they live wonderful life, camping together, exchanging ideas, and it becomes cool. Well, I'm going to miss it this year. I went last year, the year before, meeting these young people, and I wish I could stay with them in the camp and spend my wonderful time there. So startup is not just an idea. You have to have the right environment to support it. And for a small country, it's very important that you are even more supportive than a bigger country. If you are born in California, so you're lucky because the Silicon Valley is there. If you have a brilliant idea, someone will pick it up. But if you are born in Armenia, you have to get the support both from the government, from the environment, and to maintain you and to bring your idea up to, because everybody knows. And I know personally that because my elder son, all his life is doing startups. One in cybersecurity, the other one in music management, now he's in data management. He loves that. He's not 16 years old, he has 3 children, but he loves that because it's an innovative way of looking to the world. It keeps you probably young. From that point of view, I would like our friends to look to Armenia as a startup nation. So we're a startup nation. If you have a startup guy, you can come to Armenia. First of all, you'll get the support for up to 30 people. Maybe if you are talented, you'll get more support. But this is a place that is young. Because being a startup nation, a startup company, believing that you can achieve something which is basically unthinkable. As a state, as a nation, or as 2 or 3 young people coming together believing that they will become the next Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. It's possible in this world. And I wish everybody, and of course, do you like it or not, artificial intelligence is going to be something that will be accompanying whatever you do. Will you be doing a startup on logistics, transportation, food, or agriculture? Without artificial intelligence, you'll be nowhere. So it's a fundamental, basic thing that everybody will need. So from that point of view, I'm happy that I met you virtually. See? Well, well, this was not possible 30 years ago. And I'm very happy that if I have made a small contribution to your conference, virtual conference.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I'm sorry to say that we're out of time, but I cannot wait till the world returns to normal. We can all come and visit you in Armenia, and that would be a great pleasure. It has been such an honor and pleasure to to have you on today and to have this conversation. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you very much, and let's stay healthy and young.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.